Hey guys, it's CS Joseph. New episode for season 14. This is, I believe, it's episode 12, and this is the next episode in the Pedagogue romantic relationships series. Basically, part 2 for season 14. First 8 episodes were just the golden pairs, but now we're doing the Pedagogue relationships for episodes 9 through 16. This is episode 12. And this is relationships between ESTPs and ISFJs. And as with all pedagogue relationships, highest sexual compatibility, but no emotional compatibility, very low emotional compatibility, which presents a bunch of challenges for people within these relationships. Now, granted, I just want to remind you folks that I'm not really going to be going into the basics so much as part of these lectures. We're going to continue to outline and flesh out relationships between each of the individual types. And I think for the purpose of season 14, we're only going to be looking at romantic relationships in the context of which relationships are successful. We're not really going to be spending so much time on unsuccessful relationships or relationships that create or breed conflict. I mean, we may a little bit in certain cases, but for the most part, I'm trying to help you guys get relationship success and not relationship failure. So we're going to focus on success and how to make these romantic relationships, these intimate relationships, successful. And I think if we spend our time and focus our energy on this, then we'll be a lot more successful from a relationship standpoint for anyone, etc. So, also be advised, there are a whole bunch of human nurture related companion books that I highly recommend anyone read for the sake of your relationship, regardless of your type. Because as much as I could talk about human nurture, there's a lot of human nature concepts, or excuse me, I said that backwards. As much as I could talk about human nature, there's a lot of human nurture concepts, that additional principles and standards, especially ethics as well, that needs to be understood when it comes to intimate relationships. And given that we live in a feminine primary social order of a society, this is not exactly something that is well understood, and this actually puts men currently in a disadvantage in terms of intimate relationships, especially in Western society. I'm not entirely sure how it goes ethically speaking from from an Eastern point of view, but definitely from a Western point of view, there seems to be a bit of a disadvantage for men. So, but that being said, regardless of what your gender is, I still recommend everyone reads these books. And these books, while they are somewhat Christianese, you can ignore the Christian concepts and just extract the principles from them regardless, which is how I would recommend you read these books. So the first one is Real Marriage by Mark and Grace Driscoll, Driscoll. And the other book is Love and Respect by Emerson Eggerichs. These two books, I think, provide a really well thought out approach to intimate relationships from a human nurture standpoint that is pretty gender neutral. And when I mean gender neutral, I'm not talking from like an equality standpoint. I'm talking from a standpoint of complementary, etc. Everyone can benefit from this, without saying that the genders are equal, because honestly, genders are not equal. There is no equality between the masculine and the feminine. However, they have equal importance amongst their roles. That's not to say one role is more important than the other. That being said, it's just that society and feminism nowadays think that it is, and it's just really not. So why am I mentioning this as part of this lecture? It's because this lecture contains ESTPs, and ESTPs, whether men or women, really especially need to know these concepts. Why? It's because of a concept known as unconditional respect. When you're having a relationship, Men are expected from a societal social order point of view, very expected to provide unconditional love for their women. However, if that expectation exists, so also there should be an expectation of unconditional respect from women to men. The problem is that society doesn't really allow this, and it doesn't support it or expect this of women, and thus women end up having this point of view that, hey, I don't have to respect my man if he's not earning respect from me. And this is basically what separates the women from the girls, honestly. Real women, women of character, actually truly understand the concept of unconditional respect. However, because this concept is not actually well adopted amongst women in culture, this especially destroys ESTPs, regardless of their gender. Why? It's because ESTPs are naturally respect-based. They live and breathe everything by respect. And it's even far more important for men to understand that. But, it's because they utilize it all the time. But ESTP women, however, can become insanely disrespectful. Because from their point of view, they're like, I'm not going to submit to anybody. Well, the thing is, though, if you have a woman and you're a man, you're in a relationship with a woman, and she's not willing to be submissive to you, well, you should throw her ass in the dumpster. Because there is no point in being in a relationship. I don't care how smoking hot she is. I don't care how fine her ass is. And she's disrespectful. She's not submissive. Well, get rid of her. Honestly, there's no point. There's really no point. And the thing is, most people don't understand about the requirements of unconditional respect. And it's especially hard for ESTP women, for example, to show that unconditional respect. It's especially hard because of how respect-driven they are. Not only that, from the ESTP male standpoint, because they innately understand their need for unconditional respect, probably more than most people, they end up using it as a weapon, and this is why ESTP men end up having this reputation of doormatting women in their life. That's not to say that all of them do that, but they can also take it very far. And this is something that comes out consistently within the pedagogue relationship of the ISFJ and the ESTP. It's extremely common. To the level of, I can't believe how common it is. It's because anytime I've ever, in my coaching practice, for example, anytime I have ever coached a relationship like this, it's been something that I've personally had to deal with on a regular basis. Someone is always complaining about being disrespected. In fact, actually, in my own family, I had represented in my own family a pedagogue relationship between ESTP and ISFJ. And it was basically my ESTP cousin, her name's Nicole. She's actually a really cool person. Her and I have an interesting history together, but regardless of that history, I've come to respect her and I've come to appreciate her, and she's just trying to make sure that I'm not being like a weakling in my life like most ESTPs do, because it's like, hey, when it comes to family, I have to be, the ESTP sees themselves as this person who's like, hey, I'm responsible for other people. Because, ESTPs, see themselves as this person who is like, hey, I'm responsible for other people's strength, and I look bad, and I feel bad if I'm not strengthening other people around me. Even though sometimes they can be super hypocritical about that, which is also extremely frustrating. It's very frustrating. So when it came to Nicole, and then there's this kid who was an ISFJ at the church that I grew up in. He got with her, and she was doing hypergamy pretty hard, going all nymphomania, vice. There's rumors of her sleeping with other men, even though she was in a relationship with him. They're 19, 20, etc. at this time. And one of those one of those, this other guy named Adam, she admitted later that she did actually sleep with him while she was in a relationship with my friend, whose name is Martin, at the church that I grew up at. And that really sucked. Sucked for him. He is extremely, loyal to her, etc. He worked his ass off for her. He didn't really get anything back. And his biggest complaint about her consistently was that, she was disrespectful to him. Well, fast forward. Funnily enough, last night, I had a ESTP ISTJ golden pair that I was dealing with last night. And he was complaining about his ISTJ wife being so disrespectful to him as well, because he's like, sometimes she just treats me as if I'm stupid because she assumes that because I don't read very much that I must be an idiot, and which is technically, we all know that that's not really accurate, right? Well, that's just these examples just show like how integral the idea of respect is to an ESTP. So whenever you're in a relationship with an ESTP, you always have to keep that in mind. It just doesn't matter. They're so respect-oriented. And you could even make the same argument for an INFJ too, because they're very respect-oriented with their ESTP subconscious, but it's not so much as it is with an ESTP main. And you can even argue that with like an ENTJ woman and an ENTJ man. The ENTJ archetype, it's known as the alpha of the intuitives, just like the ESTP is the alpha of the concrete, of the sensors, basically. So both of them are very, very respect-based as types, and they take it very seriously, male or female. Although, interestingly enough, ESTP and ENTJ females, while they externally make it all about respect, deep down, like any other woman, they're looking for love. They want to be loved. Because if you take the love away from their relationship and they're still getting that respect, they just crumble. They just absolutely crumble. And even though they'll deny to your face that they care about, they don't care about love as much as they care about respect, the reality of the situation is, when you look at it practically and look at their behavior, you have to judge a woman by her behavior, not by her words. Let's be honest. Women can be duplicitous, so you have to actually, as men, you must judge a woman by her actions alone and not her words. Words are not really worth much. And of course, in ESTP and ENTJ, those two types specifically, well, they understand that. They understand that more than anybody else, quite frankly. Talk is cheap. And they understand talk is cheap. ISTPs do as well, and so do INTJs. It's so interesting seeing how STPs and NTJs are very similar in that vein. And that's why, especially when they're women, they're extremely, they're very masculine, and the people that they're compatible with, the men that are compatible with, are technically effeminate in their nature. But they have to learn their masculinity and express their masculinity through nurture, right? Whereas, like an ESTP male and an ENTJ male, they can express their masculinity through their nature, but anything feminine, they have to learn it through nurture. It's the other way around, right? And this is a concept that most people don't understand. This is why nurture is so insanely important. But that's also why the pedagogue relationship is also insanely important. So, pedagogue relationships, remember folks, they are highest sexual compatibility, low emotional compatibility. And that low emotional compatibility creates conflict. And that conflict actually, provided the two stay together within a monogamous situation, that conflict actually leads to the personal growth and development and additional maturity of both partners involved. And we've seen this time and time again. This is why, people who really want to, get into cognitive integration, or they're on the path to enlightenment, etc., quite frankly, a pedagogue relationship, in my opinion, really fast-tracks people to that. Because this relationship, while they can have the highest level of sexual connection, just like you can with a golden pair, you're not in the same quartet, If you don't know what a quartet is, you might want to check out the Ruby conference that we have specific to that, to quartets. A quartet is like, an INTJ and an ENTP has the same quartet. They have the same four sides of the mind. They're just in different locations, right? Yet they're a golden pair. That's why they can have the highest highs and the lowest lows, is because, they're in there. But if you look at, for example, an ESTP and an ISFJ, they actually have completely different four sides of the mind, so it actually increases their ability to be complementary to one another, which has some serious advantages, and also gives them access to 50% of the total cognition available, the 50% of the cognitive genome, basically, within their relationship, which promotes learning, it promotes growth, it promotes development, it makes them better people, it makes them more effective in like almost every way. And if there's ever an issue, they can communicate their way through it using human nurtural techniques if their nature is failing on the emotional compatibility side, or they could just go to the bedroom and and bang, bang, bang their way to success. It's pretty simple. And out of all of the intimate relationships out there, the relationship that needs to come together the most is the pedagogue. The pedagogue relationship. This is why I highly recommend daily sex. Daily sex for this relationship. It is so worth it. Absolute daily sex. Which may be, a little bit difficult for people to accept. But honestly, to get the absolute most out of the personal growth and the relationship, the intimacy and the closeness, daily sex is required. It really is. The other relationship that I also highly recommend daily sex is the benefactor relationship. But we haven't gotten into benefactor relationships yet, so I'll just leave that here for now. But pedagogue and benefactor sexual relationships absolutely need to have sex as often as possible. Daily sex. Unless, of course, they agree for a small amount of time to not have sex, but then they come together again lest no one gets tempted. That's technically biblical. The Apostle Paul said that. But yeah. So anyway, that's the nature of the pedagogue relationship, and a lot of people they don't understand that. They often question I thought this was the golden pair, or some people actually think the benefactor relationship is the golden pair. No, it's not the golden pair, but it's still insanely effective, and definitely a relationship worth investing in. If you're someone who's into monogamy, for example, then definitely go for it. So ESTPs, ISFJs, right? So ISFJs, super dutiful. ISFJs oftentimes willing to drop everything they're doing to provide attention to the ESTP. The ESTP's number one need out there is attention. They need attention. And if they don't have attention, they freak out. And, it's so interesting because SI Hero is able to has the largest attention span of all the types. So it's able to provide extroverted sensing hero with the attention span that it's looking for, right? And, we see this consistently all the time. This is sometimes like, when an ESTP man's in a monogamous relationship and all of a sudden he starts to get cold feet within his relationship. And it's usually because his woman is not giving him enough attention. And, statistically, this would happen, if his woman was ages 20 to 25, because at that point in time in her life, she has highest sexual market value and able to leverage that for her own sexual strategy according to, feminism, etc. And the ESTP can be frustrated with that because it's like, why can't I just have her attention? Why can't I perform well enough to get her attention, right? Because, being masculine, it's all about, it's very performance-based, but performance is especially taken extremely seriously by an ESTP. And a lot of people just don't realize that. This is why, when the ESTP doesn't have people's attention in general, they kind of start crumbling a little bit. They start to lose hope, They lose hope for their relationship because it's like, oh crap, I don't have his attention anymore. I don't have her attention anymore. And then they lose hope. And when that happens, it creates insecurity. And that insecurity leads to, it leads to like a fight or flight response, okay? So the insecurity is that, okay, well, why am I even here right now? Why am I investing time in this person if I can't have their attention anymore? I'm going to fly the coop. I'm out of here, right? So then it causes the ESTP to abandon the ISFJ in this particular moment, okay? Well, when that happens, that's kind of like the nymphomania vice coming out of the ESTP at that moment. Or they go fight mode, and they fight fire with fire, and it's like, what they end up doing is that they force the ISFJ to give them attention against their will, or they extract that attention. Another reason is that, and it gets even worse when you consider FI trickster within an ESTP, because from an FI trickster standpoint, they don't know how to make their intimate partner, especially an ISFJ, their priority. And from a priority standpoint, this can cause a lot of emotional issues for the ISFJ even, because while the ISFJ has to constantly prove to the ESTP with concrete actions that the ESTP, male or female, doesn't matter, is the priority, because they have FI critic at least, and they're capable of doing that, the ESTP can't really provide that so well to the ISFJ. And this creates a huge amount of conflict that requires a lot of nurtural-based communication to be able to solve within the relationship. So it all comes down to that fight or flight mode as a result of a lack of attention. The thing is, though, if it's an ESTP woman and you actually give her the attention that she wants the most from you as a man, guess what's going to happen? She'll lose respect for you. So then, as a man, if you're an ISFJ man, it's like, well, wait a minute, that's a catch-22, Mr. C.S. Joseph. That's not fair. Her biggest need is attention. I give her all my attention, and then she loses respect for me. And then the relationship breaks apart. Or, if I don't give her any attention, she goes fight or flight mode, and then she'll fight me, use her malicious mirror against me, and it's like, oh, if you're going to go out, fine, I'm going to go out. I'm going to go out the bar. If you think it's okay to hang out with other women, fine, I'm going to go hang out with other women. If you think it's fine for you to hang out with other guys, fine, I'm going to go hang out with other guys. You know what I mean? And they use this malicious mirror, even though the ESTP can't even remember the context of what they're, they can't even remember all the good things or all the support provided by the ISFJ to them, or however many times the ISFJ has dropped everything for them in the past, which ends up causing the ESTP to actually become entitled, which the ESTP is going out of the way to not be entitled. But guess what? It's so funny. This is the hypocrisy of the ESTP. ESTPs go out of their way to expose other people for being charlatans. They go out of the way to expose fake people. But when it comes down to it, and it comes down to meeting their own needs, when they become afraid of sharing how they feel with other people because they automatically assume no one else is going to care, or they assume that people are going to judge them for being a low performer because they're talking about their feelings, it creates a self-fulfilling prophecy that leads to that fight or flight mode to begin with anyway, which, guess what, is yet another catch-22 within the ESTP ISFJ relationship, which just absolutely screws up. Welcome to FI Trickster, folks. Welcome. And I'll be honest, I deal with this on a daily basis in my own relationship. Absolutely. However, thankfully, I have the ability to communicate this throughout my relationship so that she can come to a higher understanding of herself in the process. And then as a result, we can have a beneficial relationship. But most people don't have that issue. And that's the thing, the ESTP, they have needs. These people have some serious needs. And based on that, sometimes their needs aren't being met. and it just creates this fight or flight mode. Everything about an ESTP, at the end of the day, you always have to see them in fight or flight. It's getting them out of fight or flight. That's what the ISFJ has to do within the relationship. They just have to all the time, right? So what can the ISFJ do to actually get the ESTP out of fight or flight? Well, it's a little frustrating, but the ISFJ has to be willing to do things like surprise free time. Drop everything that they're doing to go give some attention to the ESTP. Remember what I was talking about a few minutes ago? Talking about the men who give all of their attention to their ESTP woman and their ESTP woman loses all respect for them? That's the thing. That's the problem right there. No attention leads to fight or flight. All attention leads to disrespect in the relationship, cause the relationship to fall apart. Therefore, the ISFJ must understand that it is their duty to create a world of balance within themselves and within their life and within their relationship. This is true of ISFJ females as well, but it is especially true of ISFJ males. ISFJ males need to give some of his attention to his ESTP woman. Some, not all. Guys, ISFJs, you guys are some of the biggest doormats of the types. Crusader types have some serious doormat issues in intimate relationships. Let's be honest. Crusaders, you guys get like super doormatty, and guess what? ESTPs naturally doormat other people. That's just what happens, So what do you do in that situation? You give some of your attention, not all. This is why the ISFJ seductive style needs to be close to the coquette. Here, I'm going to give you some of my attention. Oh, I'm taking away my attention. Oh, I'm going to give you some of my attention. Oh, I'm going to take away some of my attention. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. This keeps the ESTP in a position where they have enough hope to stay in the relationship and stay committed, while simultaneously they're respectful, as women, for example, in this particular moment. Because from an ISFJ male standpoint, you guys have to make yourselves your own mental point of origin, but it goes even further than that. Your true love of life, so most ISFJ men, you guys consider your women to be like the love of your life, right? If you're like committed in a monogamous relationship to your woman, maybe you're married to her, she's the love of your life, right? Wrong. That's wrong thinking. In fact, that's known as one-itis. You can't have one-itis. You might want to study Rollo Tomassi to understand what one-itis is, but going on a little bit further than that, to go outside of red pill ideology, for example, it's actually so much more than that. An ISFJ actually does need to have a one-itis. But the focus of the one-itis can never be a woman, especially an ESTP woman. It can never be a woman. Never. So instead, so many people dodge, LOL. So it can never be a woman. The ISFJ man has to make his life, the purpose of his life, what he wants to do, his interests, how he lives his life, the focus, the absolute focus of his life. He needs to make that his one-itis. He needs to make that the focus, not his woman. He needs to see his woman, even if she's an ESTP, as a side piece, a literal side piece. Kind of like, Psychic has this song called Side Piece. It's about, having an extra girl on the side that you're banging while you're banging your main girl. You know what I'm saying? Well, an ISFJ man in a relationship with an ESTP woman needs to have that set up for his own relationship. Except his main woman in his life is not his woman, it's actually his own life and how he wants to live life and the experiences that he wants to have, and it's all based on his design and his duties and his discipline, where he's putting everything in his life above his woman. Which, guess what, causes his ESTP woman to respect him. And then she's more willing to provide that unconditional respect to his, to her man at that point. So these things are super important, and most people don't understand these concepts with these relationships. As long as the ISFJ man does this, he'll be able to go all the way with this intimate relationship, and it'll be amazing for him. Well, here's the issue, though. When, again, you still have to provide attention to your woman as an ISFJ, so provide that attention sometimes. Or a way that you can provide attention to your ESTP woman is the following. Hey, I'm going to go do this. Do you want to come with me? Give her the choice. Give her the choice. You make the statement. You tell her what you're going to do before you do it, and then you ask her if she wants to come with you. That is an example of you living your life for yourself and making your own life your actual woman, your focus, your one-itis, for example, making your life and putting your life and your purpose in life above your woman. And it's like, hey, I'm going to go do this thing. Yeah, it's just for fun, or I'm taking care of myself, or maybe it's helping me fulfill my purpose regardless, but you could come with me if you want. Treat your ESTP woman like a side piece to your life. That way, she will respect you, and simultaneously, you are fulfilling her intention needs at the same time. That way, you don't have fight or flight, and you're getting the respect at the same time. And this makes the relationship even better. It's absolutely fantastic. Why would you not want to do this? You know what I'm saying? As an ISFJ, you'd have the best possible experience ever. And, ESTPs, male or female, they have INFJ subconscious, which means they're extremely wise people. And they can confer that wisdom upon the ISFJs in their life. This is why the Pedagogue relationship is so powerful. But the thing is, too, is that the ISFJ provides the ENTP subconscious, which is able to create and design amazing systems for the ESTP to follow. That way, the ESTP never gets scared or never loses hope. Because, let's be honest, ESTPs have some serious hope issues because of introvert intuition inferior. And they can lose hope easily. That's why they need to see concrete actions from their partner, and having constant shared experiences or surprise free time or, things like that. You know what I'm saying? Because that surprise, but shared experiences tells the ESTP that the relationship is still real. The thing is that is the ESTP woman the focus of the shared experience, or is your purpose in life, or what you're all about, or what you want to do as an ISFJ, is that the focus and she's just along for the ride? That's the difference. Let's reverse the genders a little bit. What happens if it's an ESTP man in this situation? He will demand attention. And oftentimes ESTP men, especially in Western society, they don't know their purpose. The reality is that their purpose is to become the sage on the mountain, become a master of spirituality, a master monk, a mentor, actually just a master, basically, and taking on an apprentice from apprentice to apprentice, having their wolf pack or their gang or their crew, and making these people much better, etc. The ESTP is like the most alpha, ESTP male is the most alpha male of all the types. That's why, out of all the types, the ESTP male is literally swimming in pussy more than anybody else. Because they just naturally have it. They naturally have game. So men either naturally, through their human nature, through their type, they have natural game, or they have nurture game. And oftentimes men have to learn nurture game, right? ESFJ men, oftentimes, as near as I can tell, usually don't. They actually have an interesting natural game approach. But because, NTPs like myself were late bloomers, we have to actually learn game. We have to, it's nurture-based. It's not nature-based, right? And ISFJs, it just all depends. It really depends on where their experience is. But in my experience with ISFJs, they have to learn game over time. It's not something that naturally comes to them. ESFJs, they're just, I don't know, they're so jolly that women just end up going for them, let's be honest. So, it goes on. So ESTP men, they really, really need attention. But ESTP women, while they need attention, they don't need attention as much as their male counterparts. That's just reality. The reason why is because the female brain exists to provide respect for her man and would rather be a side piece and get her attention as a result of being his side piece, a side piece to his life, his true woman, his life, right? And his life is like the ultimate form of the feminine that the ISFJ male should be following. Of course, I'd probably argue this for any man, but I'm just using for ISFJs for the sake of this lecture. You know what I mean? Well, it goes on more, right? So, ESTP men, however, given that how masculine they are, they need attention even more. They need even more shared experiences. And they're constantly aware of their masculine need to perform at all times, for their women or anything. Because they also naturally understand that a woman is only as attracted to him as he is attractive to other women. This is just basic. And extroverted sensing hero, because they're so aware of everyone's reactions in relationships or social situations as augmented through extroverted feeling child, well, they're aware of this, and in fact, out of all of the 16 types, they are one of maybe 2 types that actually comes to a full understanding of this before everybody else. It's like so unfair. But while they have that advantage there, they also have a ton of weaknesses elsewhere, like indecisiveness and not being able to make decisions, etc. It can be a huge issue, right? Well, it goes even further than that. It goes a lot further than that. When they're developing their INFJ side, they really actually need to have even more confidence. They look like from a distance that they have confidence. When it comes to things that they actually truly care about, they don't have much confidence. And this can actually lead to conflict within the context of this relationship. Actually, it has even led to conflict in my own relationship. So, for example, she has this thing where it's like, hey, I'd like to tell you how I feel, but I don't think you'll believe me. I don't think it will matter to you. I'm assuming it doesn't matter to you. I'm assuming that you don't care about that. I'm assuming that you're not going to bother listening to me. So instead, I'm going to force you to give me attention so I could feel better about myself instead of actually allowing you the opportunity to help me solve my own problems, because I don't want to look and see myself as a burden to you. Because he doesn't want to be a burden to me. Well, it doesn't matter what gender of ESTP you are. They all see themselves this way. ESTPs don't want to be burdens to other people, right? They don't want to be burdensome. They don't want to burden others. They don't want to make their problems other people's problems naturally, because they see themselves, their INFJ subconscious, as the ultimate helper, as the ultimate healer, as the ultimate wielder of the fire sword of truth, but the ultimate healer. And they can provide an insane amount of healing within their relationships, within their friendships, within any situation. And it's like, well, I'm the healer. Yeah, well, who watches the watcher, right? The ESTP has to get to a point where they trust somebody so implicitly that they can actually open up and actually talk about their feelings. And there probably will only be one person in their entire life, maybe 2 in their entire life, a best friend and an intimate partner, for example, where they would ever be able to do that. Because they know that if they need their attention, they will get it instantly, and that other person's willing to drop everything for them at an instant. ESTPs need that. I remember one time she was at the doctor, and the doctor completely fucked up, and it turned into a really, really bad situation. And I was working, had my 9-to-5 job, and I dropped everything. I immediately left the office, and I drove really fast over to, see to her and attend to her and give her, my attention, as a result. And she told me there wasn't any person in her entire life that has ever done that for her. No one's done that for her. And I was like, wow, really? Okay. But even then, I didn't really understand the importance of the need for attention that ESTPs have. And it's so huge. Because if they have your attention, that means it's concrete proof. Because they don't care about words. They only care about actions. They only care about behavior. ESTP men, this is also, ESTP men were the men who basically discovered that, when it comes to understanding women, don't really listen to their words, only focus on their actions, because ESTPs naturally understand that words and talk are cheap, but actions are everything. Well, ISTPs understand that as well. STPs understand. This is what STPs bring to all of humanity with their psychology. It's absolutely fascinating. And this is why I have great respect for STPs, and I consider them amazing mentors for myself. Especially, oftentimes ESTPs end up exposing me for my own arrogance, my own conceitedness, as well as, me potentially being a charlatan every now and then, because it's like, why the hell are you teaching people when you won't go so far as to verify your own beliefs? And it's like, you're absolutely right. I need to verify. And then as a result, I gain that benefit, and I become taught by the ESTP at this moment, or at any particular moment, right? So, all the time, you have to be really aware of these dynamics within the context of this relationship. It's absolutely critical. But ISFJs, though, what do ISFJs need? ISFJs need to be wanted and desired. If the ESTP is not asking for their attention, or if the ESTP is not sharing experiences with them, if the ESTP is doing things without them, the ISFJ will start to question whether or not, why am I loyal to this person anymore, right? So imagine an ESTP woman demanding the attention of an ISFJ man, and then that ISFJ man dutifully gives her all of his attention, and then she loses respect for her, or she loses respect for him, and then all of a sudden it becomes a sexless, intimate relationship, and then he's like, oh, okay, you lost respect for me. Well, why am I loyal to you anymore? So then he goes and has a sexual relationship with somebody else because his needs are not being met. And then she's like, you cheated on me, you're a horrible person. She blows up, and then, and it's all his fault, right? Well, is it? It's technically both their fault. One, he shouldn't have betrayed her like that. He should have just broke up with her and moved on first, I'd say. But also at the same time, the ESTP, he also should have been strong enough to not allow himself to give her all his attention. Technically, it's mostly the man's fault. But women, you have to understand, while, especially ESTP women, while you may expect 100% attention from your man, a real man is not going to give you 100% of his attention. That's just the bottom line. The other thing is, too, as women, and I don't care what type you are, if you're a woman and you're in an intimate relationship with a man, if you are having sex with a man, he is owed your unconditional respect, regardless if he's respectable or not. Just like whether or not he is required to give you unconditional love, whether or not you're lovable or not, right? See, this is the problem with feminism right there, is because feminism don't understand these concepts. They don't even believe that this is real. And thus, the Disney-fied, society gets to a point where it's like, okay, hey, I guess all of a sudden that just means that, people have to, women are off the hook. They're not taught that they have to give unconditional respect, and they assume automatically that they're being doormats by giving that unconditional respect, and they just can't handle that. And it's especially hard for ESTP women of all of the types, given how the ESTP archetype, regardless of gender, is so respect-based. That's why I'm really, really emphasizing it with this lecture, because of that innate need that they actually have, right? So, super important, and try to be aware of that. But ISFJs, men or women, they need to be wanted. They need to be desired and feel desired at all times, right? But they also need recognition, just like an ESTP would also need recognition. And sometimes within this relationship, while the sex is amazing, and the ESTP is, all about, being forceful and exerting power in the bedroom, either male or female, and giving the absolute best experience and trying to generate amazing reactions so they can get off of the reactions of the ISFJ in the bedroom, and the sex is great. Emotionally, they have a really hard time connecting. And the reason why is because both of them are competing for the role of receiving gratitude and receiving recognition and receiving thanks. I'm sorry, but ESTPs, they don't really often thank anybody. Because of FI Trickster, ESTPs are some of the most ungrateful of all the types, and this is what actually causes them to become what they hate the most. An entitled charlatan. They all have this problem. It's so annoying. As much as they criticize ENFPs for being entitled charlatans, guess what? That ESTP superego will come out, and it's an ENFP, and like at the same time, like they're just gonna go, even worse. So, what do you do in that situation, right? What do you do? Well, you have to listen. And this is one of the biggest problems that ISFJ ESTP relationships have. They spend so much time trying to tell each other the truth and tell each other what they think and trying to get the other person to listen that they won't listen to each other. And if the ESTP woman is doing this, she's coming off disrespectful. If the ESTP man is doing this, he's coming off as unloving, right? Same thing with the ISFJ woman on that side as well. It's just unloving or respectful, and they perceive it that way. And then one or the other or both in the relationship become indignant. Indignant is when you're reacting negatively to something as a result of perceived unfair treatment. They're seeing it as unfair treatment when it's not actually unfair treatment. That's the thing. This is why in the Bible it says, people need to become slow to speak and slow to become angry, but quick to listen. And that is something that is so integral to the ISFJ ESTP relationship. And in fact, it's even integral to my relationship, because my relationship is even far more difficult than this Pedagogue relationship. When you have an ENTP, ESTP, in a long-term relationship, monogamous marriage, etc., the demand for listening is even higher. It's so easy, though, for an ISFJ or an ESTP woman to stop listening and be disrespectful, because it's like, I'm way smarter than him, or he's not appropriate, all the time. He ends up, causing, he's not aware of the consequences of his actions, but I am, and I often have to pick up his mess, etc. And then she doesn't feel wanted, or she doesn't feel cared about because he doesn't listen to her. And at the same time, it's like, wow, you're being really disrespectful because you're not listening to me. You're disloyal to me because you're not listening to me. You don't appreciate anything I do for you because you don't listen to me. Why do I even want to be in a relationship with you when you don't even listen to me? And it's just this constant back and forth about who's listening to who. It's really frustrating. Now let's look at cognitive functions. What actually can be done to solve this issue? Who actually truly has the burden of listening? Well, regardless of your gender, if you're an ESTP, the burden of listening is actually on you. The ESTP has the burden in this relationship to listen. Why is that? The reason why is because they have extroverted thinking critic, whereas the ISFJ has less extroverted thinking. And extroverted thinking is, quite frankly, the listening function. This is why it's hardest for TI inferiors out of all of the types to listen to anybody. This is why they have the biggest problem of trying to get everyone else to listen to them, but they won't listen to anyone themselves. And it's really frustrating, and it's very hypocritical. These people are hypocrites, psychologically speaking. It's like the most annoying thing. So to get around that, the ESTP, because they have higher extroverted thinking within their cognition, within their type, the burden of listening is actually on the ESTP in the relationship. Now, it's still a need for the ESTP to be listened to, and luckily the ISFJ has SI hero, which means they can be patient and provide listening, but it's still secondary. The primary listener of the relationship just has to be the ESTP, because the ISFJ has the TE trickster, and they're not so good at listening because of it. And this is one of the reasons why TI child is so alienating to people, just like TI inferior is so alienating to people, because they have this problem where they really need to be listened to. So what I'm saying is the ISFJ archetype has a higher need of being listened to than TI parent, actually. Keep that in mind. Conversely, however, in terms of Who has the burden of showing gratitude? Who has the burden of giving thanks? And showing appreciation, recognition? Even though the ISFJ is often starved for recognition and appreciation, guess what? They have FI critic compared to the ESTP's FI trickster. And FI is responsible for providing gratitude and thanks and recognition. That's its job. It's supposed to do that for other FE users. The ISFJ needs to come to the point and realize that it is their duty, it is their job to provide gratitude and thanks on a constant basis to the ESTP for every little thing, maybe not every little thing, but most things that the ESTP does, and actually provide thanks. Because the ESTP is going to forget easily the last time the ISFJ has shown gratitude. So gratitude has to be a constant in order for the ESTP to not have an emotional meltdown, okay? Just like, the ESTP needs to listen to the ISFJ so the ISFJ doesn't have a mental meltdown. You see what I'm saying, folks? And as long as both of your types, both of you people within this relationship, regardless of your gender, understand these concepts, it will give you the keys that you need to communicate and deal with that emotional incompatibility within your relationship. Not only that, ESTPs, if you become so practiced in listening, you will actually develop your INFJ subconscious so much faster, so much more capable that you'll actually become happier than when you would potentially, and faster, you'll reach happiness faster than you would in other relationships. This is the benefit of the pedagogue relationship, because your listening will end up creating wisdom, and INFJ subconscious, no one wields wisdom like INFJ subconscious. Yes, FI heroes of, for example, INFPs and ISFPs, they create wisdom, they provide wisdom, but wielding wisdom, using and utilizing wisdom, that's INFJ subconscious's job, and no one does it better than they do. Well, guess what? How can an ESTP do that? Well, having enough self-discipline to suffer through listening to their ISFJ intimate partner, regardless if the ISFJ is correct or not. And that will help develop wisdom within them. And they'll become so much better an ESTP. Conversely, if the ISFJ is able to understand that they need to be showing gratitude all the time to their ESTP, that ESTP will, not have an emotional meltdown, but they themselves, they're going to be developing their ENTP subconscious. Because by showing gratitude, it keeps their ENTP subconscious from becoming depraved. Also, they end up developing habits and systems for showing gratitude on a consistent basis because they know their ESTP needs it. And this allows them to create better systems. And no one's better at creating systems and finding the best way to do things than an ENTP. This actually makes the ISFJ smarter. The more an ISFJ shows gratitude, the more intelligent they become. And an ISFJ who is ungrateful, and they are often ungrateful because they're trying so hard to get other people to be grateful to them, it's a problem. But here's the thing. If you want gratitude, ISFJs, show gratitude. Because guess what? ESTPs will mirror you and show gratitude to you after the fact. It's there. Okay? Show that. If you really want gratitude. ESTPs, if you really want to listen, if you want to be listened to by your ISFJ, guess what? Listen to them and they will mimic you. And they will create a habit of listening to you anyway. And thus all the emotional issues within your relationship is solved. And you already have highest compatibility for sexual activity anyway. You already have the most amazing sex you're having in your life, and that's fantastic. But you're also going to be able to get over these emotional problems and not have any emotional issue after that whatsoever. This ends up creating the most powerful relationship for these two types, in my opinion. As much as awesome as golden pairs are, and as awesome as bronze pairs are, really, in terms of reaching cognitive integration and enlightenment, it is my personal opinion, this is an opinion, that the pedagogue relationship above all other intimate relationships, can fast track each of these 16 types into enlightenment, provided they are aware of these shortcomings within their nature and are able to use these nurtural tools to augment what is missing in their nature to provide that and communicate their way through their emotional incompatibilities for the benefit of each other, such that that conflict ends up being transmuted into something that turns into absolute, unadulterated personal growth and the betterment of both people involved. This relationship is paramount to the success of our race as human beings. This is why it's so important. And this is how it's so important within the ESTP ISFJ relationship. Pedagogue relationships. In my coaching practice, when I'm doing couples coaching, I do not tell these people to divorce. I tell these people to understand each other's needs, to meet their own needs first, and then meet the needs of their partners. And then as a result, the mirroring and the mimicry will come, and then all of a sudden, they're able to have an even more powerful relationship potentially than what they would have had with their golden pairs. As long as they were willing to suffer a bit, they will gain additional wisdom, which could make their relationship potentially even better. Guys, this is what you can have in your life. And this is what I want for you. And again, that's why I'm doing these Pedagogue episodes, so you guys just understand their absolute importance. They're super important. So, anyway, that's it for this lecture. If you found this lecture useful, educational, enlightening, please leave a comment below. I'm very thankful that this audience constantly makes me feel wanted and allows me the comfort and space that I need to be able to tell the truth in this format. So, thank you very much all, and I really appreciate that. So, anyway, with all that being said, folks, I'll see you guys tonight.